Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us on the Simsol webinar. What we're going to be discussing today is going to be how Simsol's pricing methodology has evolved to stay accurate with current market conditions. My name is Danny Sutliff, Director of Training of Simsol Software, and I'm joined with Frank Postava, CEO of Simsol Software as well. We have two panelists today, Gary Moselle. He's the former CEO from Craftsman book company, as well as Dave Bennett. He is our pricing database director for Simsol Software. And we're going to do a couple quick housekeeping chores here. And the first screen that you see here is just by setting the audio settings. And so basically when this screen comes up, you can check your speaker and microphone, but that should already be done. So you shouldn't have to do that. We're then followed up with the Q&A, which is a question and answer. All you have to do is type your question in the bottom below on the left-hand side, click the send button. And I'm going to give you an example. How do I use this awesome tool? And so once we click on that, hit the send, then this would be the answer by the panelists. So we're going to click onto the chat feature. And with the chat, you do the same thing, type your chat in there, and the panelists can use that. The last one is going to be raise your hand. We're not going to use that. And then we're going to start our webinar with our agenda. So this is what we're going to be discussing today. Introduction, Simsol methodology, key findings, solutions to put in place, additions for PP items due to the COVID-19 pandemic. We're going to do conclusions along with key takeaways. So at this time, I would like to get started and introduce you to Frank Postava.
Hey, everybody. I wanted to get a brief introduction just for those that don't know how we started and where we came from. It was back before WYOs. It was back when NFIP was the only flood insurance, and our original database had basically 100 items in it. It was about 1989. Simultaneous Solutions was found on the initial release of a program we called the Adjuster. The company quickly became known as Simsol Software. The Adjuster offered the claims industry a full-featured adjusting application. At the heart of this robust tool was a property estimating system that pioneered the ability to estimate claims using a virtual repair selection. The visual repair selection eliminated the need for memorizing complicated construction codes to write estimates for a simple residential loss, all the way to sophisticated commercial claims. This feature has become known as the virtual scope sheet, and many people know exactly what that is. It made the production of a full-featured estimate easy to write, review, and understand, even for the insured. In addition, it removed a layer of estimate errors due to human mistakes when entering wrong construction codes. Over the years, this database grew exponentially, and Simsol joined forces with the Craftsman book company. The Craftsman book company is the publisher of multiple highly respected nationwide construction books. We continue to stay close to our Craftsman roots, coordinating with them to make necessary alterations in the market over time. At first, we decided that we'd come up with multiple specialized databases, whether they were for I2V, contents, mobile home, etc. What was really important is that we wanted to stay true to the Craftsman book company. And I was wondering, Gary, you want to talk a little bit about the background of Craftsman book company and how you came up with the nationwide database, and just not very long, but just a little brief shot at it.
Frank, we've been in business for 70 years. The company was founded by a contractor, and originally the business was building houses. We've been publishing construction cost references for about 70 years now. We have a number of different areas of specialty, and we have a number of specialists who manage the data for those. Generally, they're about 8 different areas: electrical, mechanical, remodeling, home improvement, and so on. We publish, our primary publication is in book form, ink on paper for many years. More and more, now it's in the form of digital material, basically published on the web.
And one thing we notice now, though, over the last 2 to 3 years, that even though in the past, you could hire a plumber or you could hire an electrician, but there's been a change in the restoration world, and that's that you hire companies now. You hire an electrical company, you hire a plumbing company, and with that comes overhead and profit that has to be added to the subcontractor side. Dave, would you like to speak to that?
Sure. Basically, go back 40, I've been doing this for about 45 years in the insurance industry. And initially, your restoration contractors utilized the majority of their staff. They had interest in other sub-trades, such as they might own a carpet company or a plumbing company or an electrical company. And as Frank mentioned, they would generally hire individuals to do the work as opposed to an electrical company. They'd hire an electrical contractor. What's happened over the last several years, especially more so in the restoration industry, is that they're using 98% of their work, 98% is generally done by subcontracting companies as opposed to their own staff. So as a result, there's been an increase in pricing because obviously your subcontractor is entitled to his markup, which then affects the total pricing that's given to you by the restoration contractor. New construction, especially in the commercial area, has always utilized subcontractors for the most part. Residential new home construction, not so much, but there are still the subcontractors involved, and as a result, pricing has to change to reflect the subcontractor's markup within the unit cost.
No, thank you, Dave. I appreciate that, and that definitely explains what's going on. Let me go to the next slide. Okay. Now, one thing we decided to do was to go ahead and join all of our databases together into what we call Simsol Complete Building Repair Registry. It allowed us to get rid of a lot of duplication and to pay special attention to particular items for particular categories. One good thing was that the Craftsman Book Company had a number of books that had great coverage on some of these specifics that we needed for the Complete Building Registry. We went ahead and we started looking at our claims data warehouse. We've been running the warehouse for about 10, 15 years now, and for very long, it showed us that our database pricing was was almost not deviating. We were seeing 95% adherence to the database, sometimes higher. But in the last year or two, we saw that start to drop a little bit, which, matches up with the concept of the subcontractors. So all of that together, allowed us to, to realize that we needed to update that little part of our database and to go ahead and to allow the adjuster to determine when that needs to be done. Basically, this is a change in the insurance restoration world. And like I say, Davis spoke to that, and he's, very well. And it shows us that, just like the specialization in medical forms, we have specialization in restoration, and that's why we have the subcontractors, and that's why we have subcontractors O&P, which raises the prices a little bit if they're going to be used. There are certain trades that will always use a subcontractor like elevators, etc. Those don't change, but standard repairs, which is about 60–70% of them, they can either, they will change, and that's what we're talking about today. Okay, like I said, the use of some contractors on these smaller items has become the norm. The unique conditions on the ground for each estimate have also become more important. Craftsman was already set up for items such as temperature that they're working at, how high the material has to be lifted, and how far it is from the site. They already had some metrics for that allowed us to very easily, by asking simple questions to the adjuster, change the prices to match that. And then one small thing that has happened in certain states, in certain areas, was that they've allowed the homeowners to act as a general contractor, and they can't profit on the claim, but they do have overhead. And I'm going to let Dave speak to that for a second, because he has a few examples of where that's being done. So go ahead, Dave. What exactly is that?
Basically, what you have on a lot of residential claims and even some commercial claims, the insured will act as their own GC and go out and hire the subs to do the work. Now, traditionally in the insurance industry, the insured is not entitled to make a profit on the loss. So, but he would be entitled to the overhead, which is his time and so forth, in coordinating and hiring and reviewing the subcontractors. Now, as an adjuster, you have to look at the specific jurisdiction that you're dealing in. Example, Pennsylvania. The courts have ruled that the replacement cost of the claim, which includes overhead and profit from the GC, that amount is due to the insured under the terms of the policy, which means even if he acts as his own GC, he's entitled to that overhead and profit factor because that's considered 100% of the replacement cost. So as an adjuster, you really need to know the jurisdiction you're dealing in. If the courts have not ruled that the full cost, including overhead and profit, is the replacement cost to which he's entitled, then you can take and provide the homeowner or the commercial building owner with a 10% overhead factor within the estimate and eliminate the profit factor.
And basically, like, just as we started talking about, these are the solutions that between what Craftsman had, which is very great, and what we can put into SFA matches. We can allow the application of subcontractor overhead and profit onto the items that need it. There, like I said, there are items that already have it. There will be no double dipping there. They have it, we don't add it. They don't have it, we add it if the adjuster says so. We have small percentage increases and decreases based on all the variables on the ground. I think there was approximately 9 of them, and that goes anywhere from what temperature you're working at all the way until whether you're working on a cat. So as far as we go there, they'll be put in. And also, we decided to take our OH&P, and instead of calling it general contractors overhead and profit, it's just overhead and profit. And that way, whether it's for the general contractor or it's for the homeowner, it can be used either way and allow the adjuster to do that. These 3 solutions together, what they will do, they will eliminate the concept of a location factor, visibility in SFA, because we start with the zip code and we add all these nice adjustments to it, and we come up with what should be the most accurate price we can. And that way, instead of some number that may or may not mean anything to a reviewer or to an adjuster, instead of saying it's 110%, we can say that we included subs O&P and it's very cold, they're working in the cold. So we have reasons for these prices to be higher. So these were our solutions. So they'll be input in the program. The database is ready as far as having these in there. And now we're putting the changes into the screens of SFA to take advantage of these. To get off the topic just for a second, we had, of course, everybody knows COVID-19. And that has caused us to, we've always had PPP items, personal protection items in the database. But now what we did was we also added them to our light, medium, heavy, and very heavy cleanup, because it's going to also involve getting them on and off, working a little bit encumbered, and it will affect the way the cleanup is done. So we put them in there. And then also we've always had, actually where you can select them, because they have uses other than cleanup to where you would need to have them on when you were doing the work. They were put in there. The specs were, set up so that they would have exactly what we need. And originally this came from the concept of mold and other topics like that, but it completely applies to COVID-19. And we believe that that will help our adjusters to include, the PPE that's needed for those estimates. Dave, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, basically what we've done is under the equipment portion, the PPE has now been broken down. You have a package PPE, which includes your mask and your suits. Boots are generally considered part of normal equipment. The PPE is priced on what's used in the construction industry to eliminate, the dust when you're doing debris removal, when you're sanding and so forth. There is a difference between the PPE in the construction industry and the PPE for the medical industry. If you're involved in any type of a COVID cleanup where the premises has to be completely decontaminated, the pricing, to be honest, may need to be adjusted. And especially right now, a lot of the PPE, the masks and the gloves and the suits, they're running as much as 10 to 25% to 50% higher. But that's at this particular time. So you just need to be aware of that in your jurisdiction or the area that you're working at.
Okay, thank you very much on that one. Okay, now what I want to do with the findings. What we did is, now that we had all this fun information, we had the trending from our claims analytics engines, and thousands, if not tens or hundreds of thousands of claims. We were able to go ahead and for a year test these adjustments to the prices. What we were looking for is that the bottom line pricing would come more into line by adding these smaller changes all throughout the estimate where they're needed. We added checks to our analytics engine to monitor the adherence to these changes and to alert us at different levels of deviation, and to make sure that the changes that we were putting in were sufficient to make the difference in pricing the way it should be. All this did was result in a complete building repair registry, fully adaptable to the conditions unique to each claim. And that's what we were going for, is to make sure that when subs are being used, it's there. When the insurer is being used, it was there. When the house was up on the side of a hill, it was there. And for all the checks we did, we set multiple limits and multiple concepts of how far we're allowed to deviate, and we were well within everything we claimed that we wanted. And it was a very successful finding. It took a year and a half, give or take, and now we're ready to go ahead and let it out on everybody. So let me see. The key takeaways we got from this now is that First of all, we start with a nationwide consistent base pricing, and that we get from Craftsman. Craftsman has been solid in their pricing. We have had absolutely no complaints, nothing wrong with them. Their pricing is phenomenal. It allows us to bring in the changes that we know apply to insurance. That's what our job is. And we can bring that in when we need to. And now we've dug even deeper to bring them in exactly as they're needed. We've added the claim-by-claim adjustments with easily applied templates. That's just a software way of saying one click instead of 10. And that way, the adjustments that we're making are documented inside the NCE books and in their databases, and we're adhering to those. Again, we went ahead and left the monitoring in our claims data warehouse so that if anything was to go wrong or if anything was to, go out of our limits that we have set that we want to see, they would pop up and allow us to figure out what's going on. All of this ended up to allow us to have a short reaction time to a rapidly changing ground conditions. And anybody that's worked a CAT, whether it's small, medium, large, it doesn't matter. One tornado or a big hurricane, you're going to have changes. You're going to have shortages in labor, shortages in material. It's just, it gets that way. So we can rapidly change our prices to make up for that with actual reasons, not just numbers. In other words, we know that because we have a shortage of wood or we have a shortage of metal, that we can go ahead and that would allow us to bring up those pieces. So the changes we make are fully backed by reality and not just by a number. So that's what the key takeaways are. Okay, we got questions.
All righty, I've got a question here for you, Frank, from some of our users. And the first question is, why does Simsol pricing differ from other estimating programs?
Okay, well, like I say, we all want to be accurate, but it is an estimate. But what's really important is that the scope and the spec of all the line items differ. You're trying to compare apples and oranges, and they don't compare. Certain, with our competitors, they include certain things by default inside the spec where we don't. We have a separate line item for it, and it's up to the adjuster to put it in or not, because we just assume that they're the ones that know, and you shouldn't just put it in by yourself. I mean, it's just the way it is. So why do they differ? Because they're supposed to differ. Because we write the specs, they write the specs, and if they're not the same, you wouldn't expect the price to be the same. Nick?
Yeah, I've got another one here for you, Frank. Why is Simsol's pricing seemingly lower than the estimating platforms?
Well, like I said, what we found in the last 2.5 years was that because of the subs O&P, that even though the adjuster could up the location factors to make up for that, they weren't given a logical reason to do it. Since we found out about the subs O&P, now we have the right reason to do it and the right amount to do it. And that way they just have to tell us that they're using it and it would bring it up the way it should. And the idea of it being lower is in the past. That's not the way it's going to be now. If you leave it off, they'll be the way they are now. We have had states that have actually had to lower their prices. So it's not straight across the board lower, but if you are in the situation where you're trying to negotiate with another one of our competitors' estimates, then if they are using subs in their specifications, we can very easily, with one click, bring that up and see where we're at.
I have another question for you, Frank. Is there a way to insert tax per tray and to generate an appendix that summarizes what taxed and what is not?
Okay, well, sales tax is a very complicated issue as far as certain states have, carpet tax. There are differences, and right now we don't do tax by trade. We do it by equipment or not equipment. I'm sorry, materials or not materials. But the idea of doing it by trade is a good idea. I see that being put in relatively soon. And as far as the appendix, that's just a natural explanation of what was done. So yes, that I can see being in.
I have a question for Gary. How do you obtain pricing during a major storm event and when prices skyrocket, when prices skyrocket?
A good question, Danny. We've done extensive surveys on that. During Hurricane Rita, for example, we were producing what the Home Depot called the ProBook CD, so we knew what the price was for drywall and just about every construction material in every store that Home Depot has open. This is not a secret, and we compared carefully the costs around the country, and we found that it varied only marginally for most of the materials that Home Depot was selling. It's not to say that there was not any inflation. There was. To buy a 9 yards of concrete in New Orleans a couple of months after Katrina was very, very expensive. But in general, most construction materials now, prices are set by the big box stores, and the big box stores do not do, in our experience, price gouging during shortages. They may not have the materials. You may have to go to a different source, but they do not inflate prices as a result of most catastrophes. However, not everything that is purchased at a big everything that is you need for a catastrophe loss isn't purchased at a big box store. So we try to be sensitive to that. We adjust it using what we call our area modification factors. But with a few notable exceptions, such as roofing and concrete, material prices do not vary as immediately following most large-scale losses.
Oh, excellent. Dave, do you have any final thoughts?
As far as catastrophes go, those type of incidences, we have in the past, Simsol has relied on input from the field. Because what you do run into is items that are generally discussed, such as shortage of labor, contractors just automatically taking the opportunity, the labor prices increase, and mainly because they're overworked or you can't get the tradesmen in. So therefore, there's more time involved for the workers, overtime issues, because there's not enough of the construction industry in the area. So with the input that comes from the field, as we did with the, I believe it was Hurricane Sandy, if I'm not mistaken, we were able to assimilate pricing and determine what the actual increase in total cost in the area, which is a result of a combination of issues. But we were able to put out a bulletin and a separate database for that specific storm. But generally, if we get input in, we'll research it and make a determination and make a recommendation for the area, as does Craftsman when they do their location factors and their quarterly updates. But the real basis and final judgment comes down to the companies in the area and the independent CAT adjusters in the area, as opposed to what we can recommend in the area.
Thank you. I just want a little general question here. Now, Gary, I'll start with you. When I had sent you the outline that explained the way that we saw the subcontractor ONP, and we see the questions in your book about conditions on the ground, your response seemed to be a general thumbs up. In other words, that, you thought that was the way to go. And I just thought you want to speak to that for a second? Maybe why?
I want to emphasize the point you made, Frank, that markup is extremely important on most jobs. And most contractors would agree that markup is the most difficult item to estimate.
Mm-hmm.
Markup includes both the profit, of course, which is a matter of judgment largely, and it quite often includes contingency. For most residential jobs, there are contingencies. That's an allowance for what is not understood when the job starts. But two major markup items are the what we call home office overhead. That's and then there's job site overhead. Every subcontractor is a business. Every business has to have at least a file drawer and a telephone. They have to do accounting. They have to pay taxes. So every contractor and every subcontractor will have home office overhead. Every contractor and every subcontractor has job site overhead. Job site overhead is the temporary power, the temporary water, the truck, and certainly the supervision, non-productive labor. As a matter of practice, overhead and profit, in other words, markup, can be as much as 40% of the total costs. If you compare hard costs and compare the selling price, it's not unusual to see on a small job markup at about 40% of the final price. And of course, on a larger job, but if you're contractor is doing an airport or a shopping center, markup may only be 1 or 2 or 3%. But for most small jobs, especially residential jobs, you have to take into consideration what is a reasonable markup. And markup is a very complex question.
Okay. And now, Dave, the same question to you. You've been working with the testing that we've been doing as you leveled out the database for the sub-O&P and trying the factors that we recommend based on that. And I'm just wondering, as far as what we've done to adjust the database pricing and allow the adjusters to actually work with that on a higher level, a level of, question and answer, not numbers, not necessarily 15%, more on like, we want the subs O&P in there and we already have that data. I'm just wondering, do you think from what you've seen in the testing and what you've seen and what we've done in the last year and a half, how do you feel about the changes we're making?
Changes we're making are reasonable and necessary. As a side, I still have my hand involved in adjusting large losses and fire losses, basically. Mm-hmm. So I'm dealing with the contractors on a day-to-day basis, doing the same thing that y'all are doing as far as negotiating and looking at pricing. Biggest situations you'll run into is make sure, as Frank mentioned earlier, that you are dealing apples to apples. As long as you're apples to apples, your estimate is your opinion, his estimate is his opinion, and you should have a 10 to 20% difference, which is where you'll do the negotiating. By adding and giving the ability to put in subcontractors overhead and profit or markup, you now have the ability to, your pricing is going to be a lot closer to what the contractors are submitting when they're using other platforms. You're still going to have the situation where you run into, such as here in Pennsylvania, you have a lot of restoration work and repairs being done by like the Amish community. You don't need the subcontractors overhead and profit in that situation. The base pricing is accurate and your normal overhead and profit is going to apply, which generally will take up, I want to say, the suburbs or the outlying areas for the most part. So you need to, with giving you this ability, you now have the ability to say, if you're dealing with a local contractor who does the majority of the work himself, you won't need the markup involved because the overhead and profit will generally take care of it. Whereas when you're dealing with somebody like a Belfour, who's nationwide, or another major insurance restoration contractor in your locale, they're dealing with subs, and you're going to need the ability to add the subs markup into the unit pricing, which will, again, get you to the point we believe the pricing is accurate and get you to the estimate, and differences then just have to be negotiated. But you should always be within the 10 to 20% if you're apples to apples, and if the specs are consistent between what's being submitted to you and what you're comparing.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that. Very nice.
Well, I have one
Money.
more question.
Oh,
for you,
one more.
Frank. One more question, please.
Somebody snuck in one late.
Okay, what's new for 2020 for Simsol?
Oh, we got a whole bunch of stuff new. We have InsurTech. It used to be called FinTech, and then all of a sudden somebody came up and said, you know what? A lot's happening in the insurance world, and it's happening quick. And they call it InsurTech now. Whether we're talking drones or we're talking cameras, you know, the photogrammetry and items like that, they're coming from all ends. And so what we did was we started making relationships with all of these InsurTech companies to make sure that we use them for their specialty. We don't want to try to do their job. It might be nice to train an adjuster on flying a drone, but I tried to fly one and I really don't think that's a good idea. They have drone specialists, so what we're adding is the ability to order a report. And then we process that report into our estimating system and go from there. And that goes basically for all the InsurTech. Due to MNDAs, I can't go into specifics of names, but we have a whole bunch of nice InsurTech companies that all want to do business with us. And unlike our competitors, we want to use their base stuff. We want them to do their best work, and then we will take that best work and apply it to the insurance world, not just try to make them do our work. So that's what's for the future. We're doing that now. We're integrating with a whole bunch of partners. Now, you know, once we're able to get a trade show, whenever COVID goes away, we'll be able to show all that fun stuff. So that's 2020 and 2021. So we just want to be able to make the claim flow actually get the resources of the right people in the right place. Have the adjuster, he doesn't need to be walking on the roof. He can be walking in his office. You know, there's a lot of things that can be done. There's a lot of room in the insurance claims world for InsurTech. And we're just making sure that we get the best and we get the most reliable, and then we use their information to the best of its abilities. And that's 2020. Danny?
Well, thank you
Take
very
over.
much.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
I'm just slipping on over here. All righty, guys. Thank you so much for attending. I'd like to personally thank Gary Moselle and Dave Bennett for their participation in this webinar. And you can always contact us if you have any questions at info@simsol.com, or give us a call at 1-800-447-4676. And it was a pleasure presenting this to you. Like I said, if you have any questions on the pricing, please give us a call.